Hi, everybody. Welcome to Serenity Engage's Facebook Live show. Today, we're going to be talking about what research says about communication in senior care. Welcome back. Thank you again for joining us. Before we get started today, I would like to acknowledge that we are living in a very, very difficult time in our world. And today we're going to be talking about communication. And I think the difficulties that we're feeling in the world, communication is such a big part of that. So please listen for that as we go through today's podcast or Facebook Live. So I would like to introduce my very special guest, Dr. Mary McCall. Dr. Mary McCall earned her PhD in Human Development and Aging from the University of California in San Francisco. She only moved here to Colorado recently. And she spent her entire career studying social policies around aging in different countries. So we'll have the global aspect from Mary as well. Mary, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Catherine, and thanks for acknowledging the difficulties that we're facing in this nation and the pain. And I think communication is a really key aspect of that. So I'm glad that we're talking about it today, focused on how it can help improve senior care in senior living facilities.
Yes, thank you. And you and I started talking not too long ago. It's only maybe been a month or so. Because as Serenity, I'm all about communication across the bridges to filling the gaps of communication in senior care with so many people providing care for our loved ones and having family as part of that when they want to be, and having family have a seat at the table. So when we started talking, one of the things that we talked about is it's very hard for corporations and businesses to measure communication. So we thought, okay, let's look at what the research says then. What is the impact of communication? So let's start with the question of what does research show about partnering in senior care?
Okay, great. That's a great question. And I think that we don't often think about partners in care. There is this kind of myth that families abandon their older people when they put them into senior care facilities, but research shows that's not at all true, and that families continue to be very involved. And one of the challenges is for facilities and families and different levels of staff and administration to become partners in care and to recognize, hey, who's doing what and how can we understand this? So if we think about who's involved in this partnering for care, it's not just the family members and the nursing home administrators or the direct care staff. It may also be the janitorial staff, the dining room staff, other doctors or health professionals who are coming in to provide care for a family member. And so it's important to talk about at the outset of having someone move in, which is challenging for everyone, even though it may be a relief on some levels. Who is going to be the partners in this care team? And research shows that good partnering has positive results. So it clarifies roles for what is the family going to do, what is the direct care staff going to do, what are the administrators responsible for. And when roles are clear and people can communicate, okay, here's what I agree to do, here's what I'm going to be doing, it lowers the stress for everyone. And good communication is a key to that, obviously. And so you have better care, you have fewer complaints, there's less time spent on kind of crisis management. And the key to all of this is that it builds trust and builds a relationship. So if and when a crisis does arise, there's a basis for, hey, we're all in this together to problem solve together to provide the best care possible.
Yeah, and you touched on so many really important things there. Building trust is one of my favorite things to talk about because that is the core of everything that we do. When we as family work with our loved one to move them into a senior care community, we need to trust that community. And really, all we have is that the reviews online, the word of mouth that we might have, and the tour that we've taken. And that's pretty much what we're basing our decisions on. And we have to figure out how to build that trust, and how as families we take a seat at the table as well. And I think there's been an evolution in senior care from the very hospitality focused, where you move mom and dad in and they take care of everything.
Right.
And it's not that way anymore. You hit on something else that is really important, and that is the number of people involved in caring for our loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
When I moved my folks into a senior care community, I realized quickly how many people are providing care. You talked about the dining staff, the janitorial staff. The cleaning staff who cleaned my parents' rooms would sometimes say to me, "I noticed your father is throwing out this." And
Right.
it was, without that information, I wouldn't have known, and I wouldn't have known what to be looking for with my dad, and what was, be able to think about what was going on behind the scenes. So that's what we're talking about. For those of you listening, when we talk about the partnering in care, it's all of those people being able to have a voice somehow. And the idea of being able to measure that, let's talk about the research around that, because I think that's probably the most important thing, is to be able to show what is the actual cost to the care communities. There's the cost of time, there's a financial cost, there's the cost of stress, there's the cost of losing staff, there's a lot of costs involved.
Yeah. So research shows that poor communication results in family dissatisfaction, and you were talking about one of the things that families look for is kind of word of mouth, right? So this is costing senior communities their reputation, which is really what is going to be the source of their business, is that people want to say, hey, this community has a really good reputation for good communication, good partnering. My role as a family member is acknowledged and included. My family member's role is acknowledged and included. The other consequence of poor communication is that staff feel really frustrated. Staff then can alienate family members, which leads to increased family dissatisfaction, which we've already talked about. But staff leave, and we already know that in long-term care, that staff turnover is very high. There's research that is out there about why staff in long-term care facilities stay, and that's really important to look at too, and what administrators can do to support their staff so that the staff stay. And that's part of building trust in an ongoing relationship, is that you have staff who are there consistently. So poor communication with family dissatisfaction can often lead to allegations of neglect or poor care, and nursing home administrators and staff spend much more time on crisis management rather than kind of initial problem identification, problem prevention, and how do we work on this together. So it hits the bottom line for many senior care communities if they're not doing this communication, planning, and implementation up front with families.
Something that you said just a few minutes ago prior to this question was about setting the expectations. And that plays into what we're talking about right now, being able to set that expectation early on. Can you tell me a little bit about your thoughts on that and the research around setting the expectations early?
Right. So a lot of research shows that the first couple weeks are really, really important. And we all know first impressions are important, separate from the tour, which may look really good when you go on the tour. And both my parents were in care facilities, so I'm quite familiar with this whole process. So the first couple weeks are really important about what is the facility saying to families about, hey, here's our communication plan. What would you like? How can we include you and keep you informed about the things that you're interested in the ways that you want to be communicated, at the frequency with which you want to be communicated. So some people, the first couple weeks, every day, I want to know, how is mom doing? And I want a text message or an email or maybe even a phone call. So I want to be involved in the way that I'm capable and that I feel is most important for my loved one. So maybe that's doing, my mother wanted me to do her intimate laundry. Happy to do that, take that home. And so just talking to the cleaning staff and saying, hey, we're going to have 2 separate laundry baskets for things. And this is the family one, and here's the facility one, made a big difference for my mother to feel like, okay, my personal needs are being met by my family. And then there's lots of other things that the facility staff are doing. So who's doing what is a really important question right off the bat. And of course, those things will adjust as time goes on and needs may change, as with a communication plan, right? That here's what I want the first week. Here's maybe what I want the next month. Here's maybe, okay, now we can adjust it as we kind of all figure out how this is working.
Yes, and the knowing who to contact, who is doing what their role is. Hospice is a great example of this. If you are in a place where you have to bring in hospice, you often, as a family member, get at least 5 phone calls, 5 different phone calls. Hi, I'm the chaplain. Hi, I'm the social worker. Hi, I'm the nurse. And it's fabulous. And at the same time, you just put your parent on hospice. Your head is spinning. It's already a lot. You already have all these other people in the assisted living or memory care or skilled nursing that you're managing the communication with. Now you have this new addition. So I love the concept of setting expectations really, really clearly up front can eliminate so much of the anxiety that family feels to begin with. And family has tremendous anxiety when we put somebody into senior care, anxiety and guilt. And I think that's something that can help be alleviated. So really important stuff around the research. And I will mention here that we are doing something really unique and innovative, I think, with the research that you have pulled together and with our Mavericks of Senior Living group in pulling people from every role in senior care together to collaborate and talk about what should this look like and to create an actual 14-day plan for communication and expectation setting that will be available. So if you're listening and you're interested, please reach out to me and we'll get you connected with all of that. So let's go back to family. What does research say about families and how they're being impacted?
Well, first of all, I think the biggest thing is that there's a greater peace of mind, right? You talked about the anxieties and the guilt that we often don't talk about. Staff don't talk about with families when they move in. How can I alleviate some of your anxiety? How can I give you some peace of mind, right? And setting key expectations and roles and beginning to build that trust and relationships through good communication directly results in a greater peace of mind. It also results in better coordinated care for the loved ones. The relationships are clear, so staff can feel really positive about family. They can see them as colleagues and allies rather than subordinates. Family will do what I tell them to do, or they resent their presence or their questions. And there's less conflict with staff when there's good communication. And I think one aspect we often don't talk about is how families are communicating within themselves. And so how do senior care staff manage multiple family members? That should be part of a communication plan and discussion about expectations and roles. There's a few different programs that have been studied in quite detail. One is Partners in Care that was developed by Carl Pillemer, a very well-known gerontologist, and many of his collaborators. And that's been implemented in many facilities across the country and has shown really positive outcomes for both family attitudes, family satisfaction, and staff attitudes and staff satisfaction. There's another program that has been implemented called Family Involvement in Care Partnership, and different models for looking at how do we partner in care together. So family life education is another kind of model where the question is asked, who needs to be at the table to make this endeavor, whatever it is, a success, in this case, senior care. And I think what you're doing, Catherine, with the Mavericks is modeling that process. Who needs to be at this table? Not just people who are family members, not just administrators, direct care, people who are doing research, people who are supporting family members. And so I think that model of how do we get the right people at the table to start to tackle this question is a really great way to go, because we tend to think of organizations as hierarchical rather than more horizontal and collaborative. And yet, as you said, the model of senior care is changing. It needs to change. And so we need to think about new ways to approach this. And in the work that I've done in different countries around the world has shown there are lots of different ways that families are involved, that staff and administrators and families communicate and collaborate. So it's really important to look outside our country and see what other people are doing, but also to look at models within the United States and see who's doing this really innovative, positive kind of approach to senior care and partnering.
Yes, and how can we learn from each other? Absolutely. And I have a little tiny Jill Vitale Awesome, the CEO of the Eden Alternative, on my shoulder here saying, don't forget to include the older adult in the conversation.
Always,
So
always.
yes, yeah. So I had to get that in. So you mentioned all of the people who are communicating and collaborating, and also the impact that it has on staff. And I will say that I never had any sort of conflict at all with the staff at my parents' place, but I think that it could have been much better if we did have more regular communication. And I have seen situations where maybe a daughter comes on a weekend and mom's hair hasn't been cut like she had asked.
Right.
And daughter is saying what happened. And then if you kind of look at on the other side, the staff is saying, well, so-and-so tried to take her up 5 times and she kept batting them away, but nobody ever called the family member. So it's not that people are not doing their job. They absolutely are. And one of the things that we want to do with this is shine a spotlight on the incredible care that is happening that family doesn't even know is happening most of the time, because we aren't there to witness it all the time. And I always say, what happened, when does family visit? We visit on nights and weekends when we are allowed to visit after we get through this. Right. We visit on nights and weekends. What happens at night? It's the nighttime staff. What happens on weekends? It's a whole different staff. The residents are discombobulated. It's not, you don't get a glimpse of what's really happening in the incredible care. We talked a little bit about measuring it. And I think that's one of the things that we want to focus on in this industry is measuring the actual outcomes.
Right. And people think, as you said at the beginning, that it's hard to measure communication satisfaction, and measure the associated outcomes. But there is research out there that shows, hey, we can measure this. We can create really concrete things that industry can use to assess, to set up a communication plan, and then to assess the success of that plan, and to also assess what we think are the associated outcomes with that, including staff satisfaction, family satisfaction, client satisfaction. That can be through, again, kind of word of mouth, how people are evaluating the facility itself, how long staff stay, et cetera. So there are concrete measures that are out there, and that's some of the work that Carl Pillemer has done that's really important.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mary. This is
Awesome.
such important information to share. And for our audience, we will create a summary of this research and a summary of what we talked about today and provide that to you. If you are interested in that, please reach out to me and we'll get that to you. And everybody, please stay safe out there, be kind to each other, and have a great day.